by Whiz Buckley. How are you today, Whiz?
I'm good, my brother. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's been a long time coming. Glad we have you on. So you're coming at us from Boca. I was talking about Boca last night. Met some people who moved to Aspen from Boca. They're really fun.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, I was on a camping, kind of like a ski, like winter camping trip with them a couple weekends ago. It was great. So I don't know Boca very well, but I imagine I will learn it eventually.
Yeah. Well, Jerry Seinfeld's dad, and everybody.
Oh my God. That's right.
Boca de la Vista.
Boca de la Vista. It's amazing.
Yep.
All right, man. So I want to dig in, talk about you, talk about your work currently, how you got there, and I'm excited. So let's roll back the tape. So you had a Navy career. Can you tell us about that?
You got it. Yeah, man. I flew the FA-18 Hornet for the United States Navy for about 15 years. Graduated from the Navy Fighter Weapons School. So that's a lot of big words. So it's easier just to call it Top Gun. And flew some combat sorties over southern Iraq in support of Operation Southern Watch. So doing some no-fly zone flying. So yeah, it was pretty cool. We were mainly based out on the West Coast. And then I flew F-18s for the reserves for about 5 years out of Naval Air Station Fort Worth. So it was fun. It was a good time, but they got their pound of flesh in 15 years of flying tactical fighter aircraft. I lost 16 buddies, and not one combat loss. Mechanical, weather, stupidity. More mechanical, more weather, more stupidity. Just so kind of some trauma along those lines, and pulling 7.5 G's is not healthy for your brain. I remember one of our flight surgeons, he was like, man, you guys don't even want to know what your brain probably looks like after a career.
You're telling me it like gets compressed and like flattened. Thankfully I have a little thing here that I can do that too. That's really wild.
Yeah. And then, as a Navy guy, who's obviously better than the Air Force, because we land aboard ships, right? So imagine sitting in your driveway and having a crane lift you up to the second story and then dropping you. That's essentially the force of landing aboard the ship every time. So kind of concussive landings. And then the catapult shot, we'd go from 0 to about 150 miles an hour in about a second and a half. So a lot of, physical trauma, some mental trauma. And then along the way, I also lost 3 F-18 brothers to suicide. One of them was a groomsman in my wedding, man, beautiful bride and 5 kids. And, he checked out of the here and now. So it was awesome, but it also took a pretty significant toll too.
The one thing we missed was hearing loss and tinnitus. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh man, that's right. As I'm sitting here right now and for the rest of my life, I just have a massive high-pitched squeal. If you've ever, seen, Maverick, Top Gun or anything like that, you notice on the flight deck, all the young men and women running around, they have these big Mickey Mouse ears on. And then underneath the Mickey Mouse ears, the hearing protection, they also wear foamies. So we call it double hearing protection. Well, I was an LSO, which is a landing signal officer. So when I wasn't flying, I'd go back on the back of the ship, with a handset and just one foamy in this ear, and I'd help my fellow aviators land aboard the boat day and night. And we didn't wear the double hearing protection because we have to be able to hear the pilot change the engine, right, via the throttle. So you take a little power off, the noise changes, a little power back on. So we had to be able to hear the motors. And, an F-14 Tomcat flying 20 feet past you, trapping aboard the ship, every time you land aboard the boat, you go to full power every time because you don't know if you caught a wire or not. Because if you didn't catch a wire and you pulled the throttle idle, you're going to dribble off the end of the carrier. So, man, jets, 100 feet away from us in max afterburner just totally destroyed my hearing. And, we'll probably get into a discussion about the VA, but here's the VA in action. It literally says in their manual, like LSOs, like a mandatory 20% minimum disability, 0 for the whiz fighter, and they declined it. Years later,
really fascinating.
VA attorneys, I just gave up. It's an absolute disgrace. So the VA, flying the F-18 Hornet, top secret clearance. They trusted me with, just insane amount of things. But when you get out, apparently they think you're a liar. They start with, you're a liar, prove it to us. And I'm like, it kind of says it here. So I just gave up. So thanks for reminding me. It's almost just a daily part of my life, the tinnitus, because, I tell people I try to meditate, right? Because even in my most quiet moments, there is no such thing as peace and quiet. I think a couple of my buddies who took their own lives, I think it was the tinnitus too, just because it's an awful, it sucks. It's awful. And of course, with a wife and kids, I can't hear them, right? So I'm always saying what or repeat myself. I guess I got to break down my ego a little bit and head on over to Costco and invest in some hearing aids and a $1.50 slice of pizza, but it just sucks, man. So yeah, they got their pound of flesh and they also took my hearing too.
That's terrible. Yeah. And this is not uncommon, right? Are you familiar with this other nonprofit, Hunter 7 Foundation?
I've heard of them. Yeah.
Yeah. They're doing some really interesting work, somewhat similar to this, maybe a little more like on the kind of polluted bases and living quarters end. But yeah, there's people getting their right to disability payments revoked, unfortunately, and kind of somewhat regularly, and it's not great.
Well, and there's been some investigations into the VA. They actually pay out bonuses to employees who actually deny benefits. Like the more you like save the VA, the more you can get a year-end bonus and crap like that. It's a horror, man. I just can't even. And, some people are like, oh, well, that's ridiculous. I've had nothing but a great experience with the VA. I'm like, there's a saying among veterans. If you've been to one VA, you've been to one VA. Because, there are horror stories all over the place. And then there's a random like, oh, yeah, the one in Boise is fantastic. I'm like, okay, well, yay for you, but boo for all the other places. So, yeah, the VA is, I'm sure there's great people there, but I did not encounter one of them.
Yeah. This is reminiscent, like of our time in Washington together. We went into, is it Senator Representative Luttrell's office, and one of your talk tracks there was really great around. We're paying all this money for war, but we're not paying the total cost of war. We're effectively, the way I heard it, we're kind of like in a corporate position, externalizing our costs onto the soldiers themselves.
Correct.
The people who are doing the hard work, they're getting the cost put on them really unfairly. And yeah, could you talk about that briefly?
Well, the military does an incredibly good job of turning us into human beings that are capable of doing some pretty horrific things to another fellow human being. And then when they're done with us, they do a pretty shitty job of transitioning us back to being a human. They pay lip service to it, but there's no return in it, right? Hey man, you're getting out. You're not our problem anymore. We got to focus on the next generation of killers. So, and I used to say like, hey, we can win wars overseas, but we're losing the battle at home. Hell, we're not even winning wars overseas now. I mean, we surrendered after 20 years in Afghanistan. We gave the Taliban back to the Taliban, and everything that's going on right now in the Middle East. U.S. forces are under attack essentially daily, and we really haven't done anything about it. We have troops suffering from traumatic brain injuries, and we're just kind of getting punched in the face right now. The other national security issue of this is, as you and your viewers have probably seen in the national news, they can't hit the recruiting goals. Nobody is joining the military right now, mainly because the number one source of recruitment is our veterans, right? So it's just been generations of I served and my boys need to throw the uniform on and serve their country. I know hundreds, I probably know thousands of veterans. I don't know a single veteran who wants their kids to go into the military. It's just, so it's actually turning into a bigger national security issue that we can't even make our recruiting goals. And then, we have a saying, if you can't hit the ball over the net, lower the net. So what are we doing? We're lowering the standards. A lot of kids in the country nowadays are obese and can't make the academic standards. So the military's in a pretty bad place in this country, just as the world's starting to go to shit. So I'm a little worried about everything that's going on, to be honest with you.
Fair, fair, fair. Yeah, I've been saying a couple dark things lately that I don't love saying out loud, but it's my observations. So there's one other national security concern, then we can start getting back to your project and your history.
Mm-hmm.
Years ago, when I started hearing about people in the armed services consuming psychedelics after they get out, I started then hearing about people consuming while active duty and serving and still having pretty serious clearances. And then a friend mentioned to me this idea of people getting kind of compromised potentially through, like, say somebody gives you drugs and then kind of like holds it against you to get intel in some way. Like, I think there's also, hey, if we're not taking care of our people, even if they're active duty, which we all know some horror stories, even when you're in active duty,
Sure.
There's some holes there, like where people it's kind of in another attack vector of,
oh boy,
maybe intelligence services or whatever else. Right. So, like, that's something I've considered, and it's not a really great situation. It's another reason to kind of end prohibition here. So
correct.
There's less of an attack surface on our people who have really important secrets.
Yeah. Well, the great news is that President Biden last month signed the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, that has funding in there for active duty research into psychedelics, not veterans. They actually
10 million.
You beat me to it, man. So
I think that's the number, so it's okay.
It is.
Drop in the bucket of what we need.
It's a disgrace. Sure. It's a minute and a half of federal spending. The federal government spends $7.5 million every minute that goes by. We got a minute and a half. So I'm a little torn in my position. People are like, dude, you need to be thankful that it's a step in the right direction. I'm like, it's a disgrace. It's almost like an FU. To me personally, I think he kind of did it to pay lip service to us. Oh, we'll kind of look into it. And then Big Pharma and Big Tobacco and the alcohol lobby are like, okay, let's just kind of keep that over there. And $10 million of research. I mean, what's that going to pay for, like 0.2 studies or something? It doesn't even pay the salaries of the people that would be. It's just, but you know me, man, lead, follower, get out of the way. I'm not waiting for DC. I mean, you and I saw this walk in the halls of Congress. This is a we the people moment. This isn't coming from that's why I don't call them leaders. They're politicians or lawmakers. Leaders lead, follower, get out of the way. So this is you and I, and this is a we the people moment. Once we get enough of we the people going up to them, they're going to have to change their points of view. But as you and I saw, man, it can be a little dejecting talking to, quote, lawmakers about these issues.
Right.
You weren't on this trip. I went back up there. He shall remain nameless, but he was a congressman who's an appropriator, right? Money. And I remember giving him my pitch, and he's like, oh, yeah, and he was kind of like, I'm like, this ain't really landing with him. And I'm like, 22 to 44 veterans a day? I mean, come on, man. And then I made a mistake, right? Because I go, this was when we were sending 31 Abrams tanks to Ukraine. I'm like, hey, man, for the price of one M1 tank going to Ukraine, you could probably heal a couple thousand veterans. And he's like, oh, don't talk to an appropriator like that, Whiz. That's a national security pot of money. And he gave me this little speech about appropriations and money. I'm like, hey, man, outside of this circuit, this swamp here, it's one pot of money for we the people. You take a big chunk out of my paycheck, so it's one pot to us. I don't care how you break it up to here, but in one tank could heal a lot of veterans. And we got into it a little bit. It was pretty funny. I reattacked in a different direction because clearly he didn't give a shit about the 22 to 44 a day. I'm like, and I forget the numbers. I had that fact sheet with me, but it was like some obscene amount of billions of dollars that the Pentagon spends treating PTS in veterans and in a national level. And when I did the math and said, well, it would save the federal government a bunch of stuff, he's like, oh, yeah, okay, well, now you're talking. I'm like, oh, my God, dude. It was awful. It really is a swamp or Planet Hollywood or something. The fact that guys and gals are offing themselves every day really didn't, affect him too much. And when you put it into money terms, he started to perk up a little bit. And it makes me furious. If 22 to 44 children were being slaughtered in school shootings on a daily basis, that same politician would find a microphone and froth at the mouth saying, we need to ban guns. Why? If it saves just one life. Can I steal that language and put it in the veteran community? We need to make these medicines legal for therapeutic use for the veterans. Why? Because if it saves just one life. I love using their own words back at them in different scenarios to try and get a response, So it sucks going to DC, as you know.
Looks like I'm going next week.
So you are?
We'll see if I can keep my chin up. Yeah, right. It's it's hot and cold for me. I kind of like it. I kind of don't. But it's important work regardless, and somebody's got to do it. Yeah. Correct. So I want to dig in. Like what? So you start exiting the Air Force and the reserves. What was that like for you coming back home?
So I was a Navy guy, so not Air Force.
Sorry. Big faux pas. Yeah,
they're barely on our side. Leaving the military, you're kind of happy, right? You're like, let me get out of here. I got my paperwork, and it's really interesting because as an aviator, I was in a really unique position, and this is blowing up right now, and I got it right 23 years later. You ready? So I'm getting out with a bunch of my fellow fighter pilots, and half the separation class was like, hey, man, on your physical leaving the military, tell them you're like a quadriplegic. You got all this stuff wrong with you, and you'll get disability and all sorts of benefits and stuff. I'm like, I'm going to FedEx next month. I have an FAA physical where I got to tell them there's absolutely nothing wrong with me. I'm perfect, even though there's a lot wrong with me. And, some of my buddies were like, no, man, those systems don't talk. I'm like, well, you know what? With my luck, those systems would probably talk. No kidding, man. In the middle of last year, the FAA, the Department of Justice, and the VA started talking. And it turns out there's about 5,000 veteran pilots who are getting disability benefits from the VA who have an FAA physical that says, I'm not getting this stuff. Boom. A holy hand grenade, man. A little birdie told me it was the airlines themselves that kind of went to the VA. Why? Because they have a massive pilot shortage right now. And all of these older aging veterans are the most senior pilots at these airlines, earning a lot of money. They want to get all these guys in trouble and get them clipped so they can hire some kid that's towing banners down at the beach in Boca to fly a 777 for 18 grand. I mean, it's insane. So long answer to your short question, when you leave the military, you're kind of torn if you're going to the airlines because you're like, wait, what do I do? If you tell the truth, yeah, I might have, a little PTS, done, not flying. So they don't incentivize you to tell the truth. The funniest thing in a fighter squadron is, and every squadron has a flight surgeon. You got a doc. And that doc was always like, I'm your best friend, Whiz. You come to me and tell me everything. You got a headache. You can't even, it's called self-medicating. You're not allowed to self-medicate as a pilot. You got to go to the flight surgeon. Do you think we ever went to the flight surgeon and told them there was something wrong with us? Of course, the answer is no. So in the military, the generals and the admirals kind of pay lip service to, no, mental health is so critical and important. And the second you raise your hand, you're done. It's over with. And I know they still to this day are paying lip service to, no, that culture's changed. It's a lie. It's an absolute lie. Until we get, some retired flag officers stepping up and saying this, the culture's never going to change. But we do. General Steele, General Steele, just an incredible, just a great American. He's kind of leading the charge, former 3-star Marine general, Vietnam era guy. He's helping us, now that he's out of uniform and knows the halls of Congress and the halls of power. So we're getting there, but man, it sucks because when you leave the military and even some of the SEALs or whoever, if they leave active duty and they go to some alphabet agencies, like you alluded to at the beginning, these guys got security clearances and stuff like that. And they have to Well, do they have to be honest, or do they, kind of hide this stuff, right? I've heard different stories. I've heard of former SEALs doing alphabet agency stuff right now, telling the truth. Hey, man, I went to Mexico. I did this stuff. Nothing happened. Or if anything, they got a phone call like, hey, man, what's the name of the clinic and what's the phone number? I've heard of other guys rogering up and saying this, and they're in like an administrative hold right now. So we're almost in this gray area of confusion, right? Again, the president signing the NDAA is kind of a little bit of a blessing. It's a little bit of daylight, but man, we're still hiding this stuff. I don't mind being a pilot right now and sticking my head above the trench line, because my first and last day at work at American Airlines, I left FedEx to go to American because I hated flying from midnight to 8 in the morning and trying to sleep in a hotel during the day. So I went to American Airlines, and 9/11 was my first and last day at work at American Airlines. So I got out of the aviation industry and only got back into it recently when I bought, as you know, I bought my own couple of fighter jets that I keep down here in South Florida, that I take donors flying in the back seat, and to raise money for our foundation. And some guys on the back channel are like, Whiz, how are you getting away with that? You did this medicine. Isn't the FAA coming after you? I'm like, let me get this straight. I was a drunk. I had some drug issues. I was a horrible human being. And I did this weekend in Mexico. I don't drink. I look at alcohol. It makes me want to retch. I've never been a better father, husband, or human being, and I'm helping others heal. If the FAA is going to have a problem with that, give them my cell phone number. I have no problems being that guy right now. And I, Joe, I tell people, I'm like, would you rather your captain or first officer keep lying, keep medicating, keep drinking, keep doing all this horrible behavior? Or would you say, you know what, man, take a week off from the airlines, paid, and go get your mind, body, and soul right? Of course, the flying public's going to choose, choice B there. So until we incentivize people being honest about their mental health in this country, we're in a tough place. I mean, it's making my heart smile with Rick Doblin and MAPS and MDMA. I think, I don't know if you're on that Washington trip or not, but Sarko, he's a police lieutenant in a department just north of Boston. He's a police lieutenant who did the MDMA study with MAPS. And he's like, I've never been a better dude. Imagine police officers who've had this type of treatment, man, showing up to the scene instead of all pissed off or angry or hateful, showing up with a little bit of empathy. So the fact that, even the first responders are getting into this is pretty cool. Before I forget, and I know you wanted to bring it up anyway, we did I hit one of our massive mission objectives for the No Fallen Heroes Foundation at the end of October, was heading to the great state of Colorado and doing our first healing retreat. And I bring this up because one of the guys he's a Denver firefighter. He was one of the first guys in the door at Columbine and was in the library. And when this guy showed up to the ranch in Colorado, he looked like horse shit from hell, man. You could tell this guy was just carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. And I'll tell you what, man, when I gave him a hug and said goodbye Monday morning, he was a different human being. And I had him on my podcast recently. He debriefed everything he saw and experienced, and he is just so much lighter. So good things are coming, man. If we can get our first responders healed along with our military, I think this world would be a better place. I've been telling people these medicines have the potential to turn warriors into peacemakers. And maybe that's also why they're illegal. They need little uniform killing machines that don't do critical thinking. 60s and 70s, it was like, wait a minute, you took what? And it makes you not want to go to Vietnam and kill people you never met before? That stuff's illegal. You can't do that. That's anti-American and subversive. As opposed to, man, this made me, I am a North Vietnamese soldier. That North Vietnamese soldier is me. We are one. We are nothing but cosmic stardust, all put together from the same source, man. So I think that's why it's illegal. But, we're getting there, man. And I couldn't be more bullish on this year, on the year ahead.
Yeah. I love all that. Thank you. We had Sarko on the show. I got to meet up with him in Boston. I think we
Good
shared a
dude.
meal. It was really fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would love to do more stuff with police. Yeah, I one of my catchphrases, Buzz, is I can't wait till we have a police force that I personally can rely on and trust, because I'm kind of this like drug figure, right? Like
True.
no military background, no, first responder back. Like I'm not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily a desirable, and
Mm-hmm.
like I would love to get them on board and say, hey, like this stuff's really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Alcohol is kind of harmful, if not a
Mm-hmm.
lot harmful. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we need more options. One thing we did talk about, Sarko and I, was a thing you brought up around we're not being honest with the people who are supposed to help us, like your flight surgeon, for instance, because you
True.
get demoted, like all this shit could go on your record. You could be blocked from promotions, whatever it is, or just straight up removed from service, right?
Right.
This is an issue with police departments. This is an issue with alphabet agencies. Like, I think Claire Danes dramatized this quite well in Homeland, the
Homeland,
Showtime
sure.
series. Yeah, and like this is real. This is active, and it kind of plays into that whole compromise thing I was talking about before a little bit too. Like if you're mentally compromised or psychically
Mm-hmm.
compromised, that's not great for your doing your duty.
Yeah. No, and,
Yeah.
and a lot of the, the veterans, the first responders, airline pilots who are veterans have the type of honor and respect for themselves where they don't want to lie, right? So that makes it even worse. We get into this, dude, I'm not a liar, but I have to hide this stuff or I'm going to lose my job. So it makes it feel even more shitty, right? Like, oh man, but I'm not a scumbag, but you should be telling the truth. Well, I can't tell the truth. And we have this mental battle, this battle within ourselves that isn't good. That's why, when I did the medicine and came home, I'm like, I have no problems being out of the closet, so to speak, and speaking my truth. If you can never fail if you lead with your heart and truth. So I got no problems with that. So you and I, man, we're in the gray area right now, but it's closer to the white, right? I think we left the really bad dark ages. We're kind of gray right now. I hate living in gray. It's either black or white. So grayish right now, but I think we got some white ahead, which is good.
Yeah, I think we're making a lot of good moves, and you've played a gigantic role in this this veterans conversation. And I think it's, as we discussed in DC, like veterans and moms, I think, are the linchpins for this conversation.
True.
I've had some people come at me quite negatively for saying that, but I think it's true. Veterans want to play a part here. They see the hope. All my veteran friends want to. So
yeah.
It's
Veterans and moms, I love it.
right. It's sometimes veterans can be moms, so it's like a double whammy when we can like put those folks on stage and say, hey, I served, my kids were at risk, I did this, I was fixed, and now that testimony is really, really impressive in my mind.
We had a couple veteran moms this past year at No Fallen Heroes go sit with the medicine. We had the first 2 female fighter pilot veterans go sit with the medicine down.
Oh, I got to meet one of them. That's right.
Yeah, Arrow, I think. Aaron?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then we took another mom down to Costa Rica recently, former Air Force vet as well. So, yeah, great demographic. You got a veteran and the mom. But, veterans, it's interesting because it's a tough community, right? We don't listen to advertising or bullshit or anything. It needs to come from another vet for anything to have credibility. So, a Marcus Luttrell or a me or a JT, like looking a bro or a sister in the eye and going, hey man, this is what happened to me. Even in the back of the mind, if they're like, that's insane. There's still a lot more of, I trust this person. They would not steer me wrong. And, as you know, it ain't all sunshine and lollipops with the medicine. It's work. We call integration is a lot of work. And if you don't put in the work, you can kind of get stuck in a dogfight and it might suck. So I'm not sitting here saying it's all sunshine, lollipops, and unicorns. But these medicines can give a vet or a first responder a nice system reset and maybe take you back to before you got into the military or even your childhood. When I went to the Mission Within with Doc Martine outside of San Diego, they said, bring some pictures, right? Bring one as a kid. And I remember looking at this little blue hair, blonde eyed kid from South Jersey. And it made me cry. The innocence, before that blank canvas, before this whole thing called life happened to me, it can get you back to that default mode, that our natural state of being, which should be grace and compassion and empathy and love. Those aren't words you hear too often used by the United States military. It's the exact opposite. Secretary of Defense or General Mattis. Whenever I go into a room, I immediately figure out how I'm going to kill everybody in there and exit or something. I'm like, oh my God, man, how can you live? I mean, I get it. I had to have that type of mentality flying fighter jets. If you got into a real dogfight, there's one winner and one loser, and the loser ain't going home that night. So I get that mentality, but you can't carry that the rest of your life, having that sharp axe, and we talk about this. Another problem with veterans is the loss of community, right? When I was in a fighter squadron, the guys and the gals in that fighter squadron, if you didn't trust one of them with your life, they were gone. It just wasn't, it wasn't even a thing. Like, it was such a culture of a high performing team. We loved each other, but we were brutally honest with each other. I left a fighter squadron. I went to Chicago and a trading firm. It could not have been a more horrible experience to go from a culture of I trust you with my life to I can't even, leave my jacket on my chair. Somebody's going to steal my wallet. I mean, these people would push their own mother in front of a bus to make $1. So that loss of community, and that happens to a lot of veterans too. They lose their brothers, their sisters, they go back home or whatever town, and they find relief at the bottom of a bottle or some drugs, and it's sad. So we need to do Tom Cruise, man, I love Tom Cruise. Great movie, Minority Report. He was in the Department of Pre-Crime. They get an alert that, somebody was about to commit a crime. We need the Department of Pre-Suicide. We need a department in the VA, the pre-suicide department. Because when they happen, everybody's like, oh, man, we didn't see that coming. Or let's try and figure out, man, there are so many tells before, if we had a Department of Pre-Suicide, I think that would help out. And I'm going to put this out to God and the universe right now. I think I'd love to be talking. It's called TAPS, Transition Assistance Program. I think it's called TAPS when you separate from the military. Here's how you write a resume. Here's how you tie a tie or wear a suit. We need a day of this. We need a day of mental health. As you know, and you and I have talked about this before, these medicines are one modality of healing. Man, yeah. There's holotropic breath work. There's meditation. There's sitting on the beach. There's climbing a mountain in Nepal. There are so many ways to heal. But this is one of them, right? I say some veterans have radical trauma. These medicines could be considered radical healing. So again, this ain't for everybody. So certainly don't want to imply that, but I'd love to be able to talk to people leaving active duty and say, here's a menu, man, for mental health. And this is one of them. And I think having a Marcus Luttrell come in and talk to your TAPS class about that would be pretty cool. If it hits just, again, from our earlier conversation, if it could save just one life, wouldn't it be worth it,
Mm-hmm. And my best guess is that it would save a lot more lives than just one.
Oh my God.
So,
man.
Yeah.
And for the one congressman appropriator, I could say would save a lot of money, wouldn't it? Maybe that would get their attention. It's insane.
Which is tough. You have to make those economic arguments to these folks, but it feels so wrong and brutal. But that's the way they have to think.
It does, man.
It's tough.
Yeah. It was, I was with Juliana Mercer. She's fantastic Marine Corps veteran. She kind of had like a fact sheet of math. I had to look at it like, I can't believe the guy's going to care more about the math than a human life. But you got to, as you know, in DC, you got to be armed. You got to be like Wonder Woman with the bracelets on and deflecting bullets. But you know me, man, I let others fly to DC a hell of a lot more often and do the nice dinners, man. I prefer to go to Costa Rica. I prefer to go to Mexico. I love going to Colorado and sitting in ceremony and holding space. So, we can attack in parallel. We can have folks doing the DC thing, and I'd prefer to have my mouth guard in and my chin strap on and go right up the middle and keep healing people. Because that's how we're going to, I call it the world's greatest Ponzi scheme, man. You heal and you turn and go, man, I got to tell people, or I got to help people. So it's a Ponzi scheme of greatness and healing. So if you heal people or you heal yourself, they're going to lead by example. When I got back and, people, I wasn't clearly super open about it, but people noticed. They're like, dude, what, you look different. What's good? Are you working out more? I'm like, eh. And then, of course, the inevitable question, hey, you want a drink? I'm like, no, I'm actually good. And they're like, what's wrong? Alcohol's the only drug where people give you shit for not doing it, right? or they assume something happened. So if we can, you're flying soon, you said. The flight attendant, as soon as you get on the airplane, maybe too soon with what happened with Boeing, but when you get on the airplane, what do they say? If we lose pressurization, put the mask on yourself first, because you're not good to anybody else with you being out. So that's what I tell people. Put the mask on you first, and then you can start helping people, get better.
Yeah, and the better you are, the more healed you are, the more you can help people in a deeper, more impressive way. Absolutely.
Yeah, man. There's that song. The lyrics are like, the more you give, the more you get, man. So the more you give, the more you help people, the more you're going to get in return. The universe is funny like that.
So I'm curious, how did Mission Within come on your radar? Was that the first organization you worked with psychedelically?
Yeah. The Mission Within was the first one. I'd started a foundation called the Top Gun Fighter Foundation, big marketing department. I'm like, I went to Top Gun Foundation, Top Gun Fighter. So it sounded a little fighter pilot centric. So, but back in 2020, I didn't know what I was going to do to stop veteran suicide. Like I said, resumes, job, whatever. I was just throwing shit against the wall. And then a buddy's like, hey man, I know about these SEALs, Navy SEALs that go to Mexico and they do psychedelic drugs. And there's a really cool group going in a couple weeks. Would you be interested? And I was like, go to Mexico and do psychedelics with a bunch of Navy SEALs? Fucking sign me up, man. That sounded like a hell of a great weekend. Man, I had no clue what I was getting into.
Oh, wow.
It was, I had just enough time, like 2 or 3 weeks to do a couple coaching calls with my guide and read the manual, and just enough to be like, okay. I almost, like, if I had more time, I'd be like, I still would have done it, but jokingly, I probably would have been a bit more like, holy shit. But thank God I didn't, right? So me, Marcus Luttrell, JT from Black Rifle Coffee, another Navy SEAL veteran, and then an NFL player, veteran, who was just suffering from horrific CTE, man. He just looked, we all met in San Diego, and I drove in the caravan. I sat in the car with him. He was dead. He was death. He just gray and big and dead. I'll fast forward. I saw him a year later at a fundraiser. I walked right past him. This big, huge guy threw me an elbow. I'm like, oh my God, who am I going to fight now? It was him. I didn't even recognize the guy. White, bright, full of life, man. So we went down to the Mission Within, and Ibogaine, man. It 10 to 12 hour, the most spiritual experience of my life, bar none. It was, I didn't move for, I think the biggest decision I made in my life was like at the 10-hour point, like rolling on my side, and it took like an hour to do. I mean, I was in it. Mm-hmm. And, I lost a sister to a drunk driver when she was 19. My dad died years later of a broken heart. He was never the same after my sister Monica died. I had some childhood sexual trauma. So childhood sexual trauma, lost a sister, essentially lost a father, and then 16 buddies in the military, 3 suicides. I had hid all of that stuff, to be honest with you, man. And the Ibogaine went in there and opened all of it up and showed me, it was like God, whatever word you want to use, creator, source, truth, divine, universe. I choose to use the word God because I had lost my faith. And I was going to be a freshman in high school, which is a tough time for a boy anyway. Dead sister, father's more or less gone. I before that, I was your typical Irish cat. We were the Irish Catholic family. I was an altar boy and, all Catholic grade school. And what type of God kills my sister and destroys my family? I lost my faith for about 30 years, man. And on the medicine, Boom. He, it, she, whatever was love, light, energy, and forgiveness. Got to experience my sister again and my father, and they were perfect. I couldn't remember last time I saw my dad smile. They were both perfect. And they started to go away after I felt healed. And I was like calling out for them, like, please, oh, no, where are you going? And they came back and they kind of looked at me. And this time I followed them when they left, and they went into me. They went into the trees. They went into my daughter, Keely. They never left. They're right here on this podcast with us. And I was healed, bro. It was incredibly therapeutic. I begged for forgiveness for being a shitty father, husband, alcoholic, drug. Not that God can shrug. God just kind of looked at me and kind of, it was gone. And there was never any words. It was only energy, because that's all there is. And God said, Matthew, I don't make imperfect things. You're perfect. Let's go. And then he healed and did a bunch of other shit that was just insane. So it was without a doubt the most therapeutic experience of my life. And it was interesting because Marcus and some of the other guys, they were, it sounded like they were in a dogfight, man. They were, there were some, and I remember lying there going, God, are you going to like punch me in the face out of the blue? Is this going to get like really bad soon? Nothing bad. And those guys the next morning, they all looked completely different. I'm like, you guys good? They're like, never better. I'm like, sounded like somebody was getting their ass kicked last night. And Marcus is like, man, I was kicking the shit out of some demons, man. I killed them motherfuckers. I was like, wow. And then we got a day off of, kind of a gray day. And then we did the 5-MeO DMT. I'm not lying when I tell you this. I think as a kid, maybe into a pool, I've tried to flip twice. Both times I landed on my back. 30 years later, however long years later, on a bed in Mexico, looking at the Pacific, I did a flip on the 5-MeO DMT. It was an exorcism. It was an absolute exorcism.
I didn't know you meant it literally.
Dude.
I remember you talking about that.
I meant it literally. I went into the toad facing the Pacific, and when I came out of it, I'm looking at the wall. So, and my director of medicine operations, if she was here, she'd kick me under the table because she's like, don't talk like this. I died. And you don't want to hear a pilot talk like this. I have no fear of death, but I want to see my grandkids. I want to get old. Let me clear that up. But what I'm saying is I went from 0 to infinity and it was perfection. It was absolutely not to, I know this is a family show. It was an infinite orgasm, and it was perfect. And it answered one of my questions I had for the medicine. So my guy did a great job. Like, you should go into the medicine with 5 questions just to have on hand, and you should have 5 intentions. I'm glad I had all that because I could pull from stuff, and your time right there is use it, right? So it answered a question. Is my sister and my father and my bros, are they bored? Like, are they bored in heaven? Like, are they looking around at their watch going, where's everybody? I mean, we've been here for a while. I got the answer. There is no time. There was only that moment, which was forever. And I know people who haven't done psychedelics are probably like, that makes 0 sense to me. But a lot of people who sat with the medicine are like, yes, you get it. So I felt absolute infinity. And it was funny because God was kind of like, do you got it? I'm like, yeah, I got this. And it was kind of like, well, okay, good. But you can't stay. Now that you got it and you're good, you got to go back. So I think it was like Apollo 13, man. I think the re-entry was, I don't remember the flip, but I remember trying to get back into me. And there was still some gray, like some either regret or shame or booze it was sticky. And I was trying to get back into this thing. And they're like, dude, you got into the fetal position and you yelled at the top of your lungs. And before we even knew it, you flipped. And I guess I stuck the landing. So the 5-MeO, the toad was, they sold it to me, quote unquote, as like the icing on the cake, like the heavy lifting's the ibogaine. It's all night type of thing. The ibogaine it was awesome. The toad to me was a little. I was in the Millennium Falcon, man. When you hit the jump to hyperspace, there was no stopping. So that was a lot. That I will tell people. But I've held space for people who've done toads since, and some people laugh, some people cry, some people don't do anything. I was a flipper, man. But I got back from that, and I was like, this is the way. This is how I'm going to end veteran suicide. So I changed the name from Top Gun, sounded too fighter pilotish, to No Fallen Heroes Foundation. Because a veteran, a first responder, a family member, they're never going to call themselves a hero. They are to somebody else, right? My dad was my biggest hero. So everybody's a hero, man. First of all, you got to be a hero to yourself. If you ain't a hero to yourself, we got problems. So I changed the name to the No Fallen Heroes Foundation. And, some were just helping SEALs. Some were just helping combat veterans. I'm like, no. We're going big tent. Any veteran. Because some of the a couple of the female veterans, not near the front lines. And they're like, Whiz, we love to heal our PTS. I'm like, okay, great. This is what we do. And they're like, yeah, it ain't from combat. It's from rape and sexual assault. And I'm like, oh my God, man. So I decided to go more inclusive with No Fallen Heroes Foundation. If you put a uniform on as a veteran, and a lot of veterans do what? Or active duty. They leave, they take off their Navy uniform. They don't take off the trauma. And then they go to be a sheriff, a state trooper, or a firefighter. And they put on a new uniform with new trauma. So even, veteran first responders are like quadruple problems. And then obviously family members, because they serve too. 99.9% of my beautiful bride's trauma, unfortunately, is Whiz induced. So I wanted to help all of those people potentially heal. And I do think those are all heroes. So that's our mission objective, is to provide healing grants to all of those folks.
That's amazing. How was it operating domestically in Colorado? I remember you had some commentary that like veterans had to go overseas or out of the country to heal themselves, and how wrong that is. But like, how was it being in Colorado?
Oh, it was great, man. You nailed it. When you and I are in DC, I tell these lawmakers, I'm like, are you kidding me? I got to take these guys and gals to another country to heal trauma that they incurred serving this one. It would make me furious. But thank God for the state of Oregon and the state of Colorado making this legal at the state level for therapeutic use. So, man, Joe, I got to tell you, instead of hopping on a JetBlue flight to Costa Rica or going to Mexico, having to sneak across the border, and it was heaven. Landing in, I landed in Montrose, right? Went to Denver, Montrose. I'm like, I'm in America. I'm in America, sitting in ceremony around a fire with Americans and great human beings, and thank you, Colorado. So it could not have been. It could not have been better. And I don't know if a lot of people know this, but if a veteran or first responder ain't doing too well with Uncle Sam, they can take your passport. Like if you have unpaid taxes and stuff, you can't even leave the country. Right. Whoa. So I've had veterans like, dude, I can't go to Costa Rica or Mexico because I got IRS issues or unpaid, I got a lien. I'm like, oh my God. So your passport wouldn't work. So just some of the logistical issues of guys and gals that couldn't leave this country, now they don't have to. Now we can go to Colorado and heal. So I laugh at California. I don't know what the hell Gavin Newsom did, but he vetoed something. You would have thought that California would have led the way on this stuff. But at least, and better than I do, it's decrimmed in a lot of areas, right? Like Sacramento or Oakland or wherever. So it's at least at the city level a little bit decrimmed. But, I'm sitting down here in the great state of Florida, and, I'm kind of looking at Governor DeSantis with a hairy eyeball. I'm like, dude, you're a Navy guy. Why aren't you leading on this? So we got to drag the Republicans along, it sounds like, except what's his name? Governor Abbott in Texas, man. So the Dell School of Medicine, the University of Texas, the Dell School of Medicine has a psychedelic branch. God bless Governor Abbott. And they're actually doing a psilocybin study with Gold Star spouses and moms, I believe. So these are These are women who have suffered horrific loss. And I talked to one of the guys in the studies, like, you're going to be blown away by what the results are. I mean, these women have seen some significant healing. So long answer to your short question, going to Colorado made my heart smile. And don't get me wrong, I love Doc Martine and the Mission Within and Awaken Your Soul. And there are times for that, like out in Colorado, nobody is that I know in my network is certified, blessed to sit with or serve Iboga or Ibogaine yet. Although I know it's channeling and we're getting there. But, when we went to the Do Good Ranch, it was for psilocybin and 5-MeO-DMT. So once we find somebody, and maybe even, somebody reputable, or maybe Dr. Barsuglia to do Ibogaine or Iboga out in Colorado or Oregon, that would be great. Because some of the addiction issues and some of the traumatic brain injury stuff is more Ibogaine and Iboga-ish, and some of the other stuff is more psilocybin. And I know I'm speaking to the choir.
Yeah, we saw that with the very recent Stanford study that came out. I'm actually probably going to start microdosing Ibogaine for my head injury I had last year. So that should be really interesting to see how that recovery comes, and I'll report back on the show for everybody there.
Oh, that's great, man. Good.
May or may not go flood dose, but we'll report back. Flood dose is super interesting to me. I've been connecting with a gentleman from Gabon who's actually the first ever guy from Gabon to play in the NBA. He also holds the only export license for Iboga from Gabon, which is quite interesting. Yeah. So very, very interested to develop that thinking. And you mentioned a really good point. We don't have a lot of training around Ibogaine right now, or Iboga generally. We have the traditions, which are really valuable, but we don't have that Western, clinical frame all that well fleshed out. We talk about it a little bit in our 12-month program, but it's such an obscure compound that we think should be treated with a lot of respect, that we understand it needs special training, a lot of special training.
So I might be heading to Gabon in a couple months. So our director of medicine operations, Nicole Fox, last year, she blonde yoga instructor from Fort Lauderdale, man. She went to Gabon 2-3 weeks in the jungle of Gabon. She was initiated into a Bwiti tribe. And I think it's calling me, so we might go back together. And if she goes back, if you sit with it again, that tribe will give you the Omni blessing to be able to serve it. So if you go once, and you can become an initiate. If you go again, they can kind of put you over here and make you a flight instructor, and maybe, I don't know, kick your ass even more, whatever the sign off is to be an instructor pilot. So hopefully Nicole will be able to do that, so she can come back in the US and be, at least on the Bwiti side, able to serve it. And then of course you and I got to deal with the state level and Uncle Sam and stuff like that. And I get it. We don't want unscrupulous stuff, and we don't want any of that, but it is kind of funny to be talking to these guys and gals in Gabon that have been using Iboga for centuries and centuries, laughing, what's a beaker? What's a lab coat? What's a double blind study? We've been doing this stuff for a couple thousand years, but you do you.
Let me show you the spirit world. You got 10 hours.
Exactly.
And more like a couple of weeks, right? But also it's a big deal. And I love how you're talking about this, because it is important that we take them seriously and what they've learned and what they share with the world. They've been at this a lot longer than we have with the Iboga, and I think we could make it a lot easier on ourselves if we learn from them and take some lessons. So
man, I how do we do that, right? I mean, because I actually told Nicole, I'm like, can we fly those guys to Colorado? Maybe let's bring them to the U.S. kind of, so we actually thought about that logistically too, to get them here and to do the medicine stuff. That falls in the more of it's harder to do category than us going there.
Sure.
But yeah, man, how do we get these people in a room and say, can you teach us? Can we just listen to the wisdom of this stuff? And that's what Nicole said. She's like, you're going to, buckle up, man. This is a 2-week, she's like, I did more Iboga than my body weight, and you're going to see and feel everything. So, yeah, this is this is going to be some heavy lifting. But you know me, man. We don't send anybody anywhere to do any medicine unless I've done it there or Nicole's done it there. So we go, and it just makes sense, right? We're not recommending anywhere or anybody or anything that we haven't done. So I think Gabon's calling. So I'll report back and let you know.
Please. That's amazing. And I love hearing that. So much courage that you're going to jump in, but you already have that last experience to give you the faith you need. So
yeah,
it's really amazing.
Yeah. It's the weight of it's starting to hit me. And you know me, man, I treat the medicine work like a combat mission. This is not for the faint of heart. This requires study. This requires diet. This requires intention. This is not, and you've probably had thousands of people tell you like, oh, I did mushrooms once and it sucked. It's like, okay, man, setting. If you're not, I took it at a concert and, I'm like, okay. So see how veterans, first responders, and all these places treat the medicine. There's calls beforehand. There's diet. They look at the medication. There's medical intake, This is a very serious undertaking. So the vast majority of people that I've bumped into anecdotally that say they, quote, had a negative experience, there were reasons for it. The medicine just didn't go, I don't like you for this reason. So yeah, it's definitely going to be over the next couple months, some immersive training for the whiz fighter.
I'm excited for you. I want to bring it back to Florida. Do you have any line to the governor? Like, do you think you could kind of like?
Yeah, I can get to him. I have a buddy who's a very big donor, and I haven't tugged on that yet, but I'm getting close. I'm kind of, I don't want to get into the politics. I'm waiting for him to probably drop out and get back to being a governor. When he gets back to being a governor, I think his bandwidth is going to be a little bit more. Hey, what's been going on in Florida since I've been gone? And I'm going to be right there. Hopefully. Yeah. I'm a Navy guy. He's a Navy guy. He needs to be leading. If I know he and Governor Abbott in Texas kind of do who's the better governor. So Governor DeSantis or any of your people listening, give me a call, man. We need to heal our veterans in Florida.
Was there a thing in Florida? Like I remember when the Dell School, UT Austin got some funding there from the state of Texas. I remember there being a corresponding kind of discussion in Florida around funding psychedelic research in universities. Do you recall this?
Really?
It was that Texas-Florida competition, exactly the same kind of thing. I don't know that it landed, but it was a pretty loud conversation a couple of years back.
Oh man, well I missed that one, or I would have been involved in that. That needs to happen again. Damn it. Yeah. I'm gonna start poking around. I'm gonna start digging. If you have any background on that, let me know, because I'll try and rekindle all that stuff, man.
Yeah, I'll try to dig in. But I think your tactics sound right. Like wait till he's back, and that's like very likely. And then you can then start lobbying. So Florida's so veteran heavy that it's like illogical not to, right?
So Florida is technically 3 states. You got the East Coast of Florida, you got the West Coast, and then you got the Panhandle, man. Technically 4 states, the middle. So there's a whole, one of the main reasons gambling hasn't been legal is because, you got Broward down here, and then you got, Tallahassee, the Panhandle of people playing banjos and stuff. Not that banjos are wrong, but you got kind of some of the Bible Belt up here mixing with Las Vegas of the Southeast together too. So it'll be interesting to see how that hits with lawmakers, right? Do we get these are the medicines of Satan and demons, or do we get, you guys are going to be partying Miami with it? So it's going to be an interesting discussion in the sstate of Florida. I guarantee it.
Well, I'm excited for it, and I'm glad
I'm
you're
here
there
for
it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm that guy. I'm going to succeed or I'm going to die trying with the stuff, because the stakes are too high. And as you said, massive veteran population here in Florida, and a massive active duty population. We got Air Force and Navy bases and Army installations all over the place. So if Uncle Joe's signed in stuff to approve active duty research for psychedelics, how about a little something for the veterans too, Joe?
Mm-hmm. Amen. So, Wiz, how can people support you and learn more about what you're up to?
Yeah, man. Head to nofallenheroes.com. That's our website there. And then obviously on Instagram, No Fallen Heroes as well. My official Instagram, my Instagram is official_ Whiz Buckley. And yeah, we love your support. All of our, everything that goes into the foundation. Susie and I personally fund our foundation as well. It all goes out the door, man. We ain't, this is, I run a financial company. I got 90 day jobs. Our nonprofit is a nonprofit, and it goes right out the door to a veteran or first responder or their family. Cause if they're, I'm telling you, bro, of course I want to wake up in the morning. I was about to say, sometimes I don't want to wake up in the morning, but when I wake up in the morning and I see a new grant request, I haven't read a grant request that hasn't made me tear up or just, it's not one of them is bullshit or a lie. It's just, there's so many people that are veterans and first responders and family members that are sticking their hand up like, you know what, man, I saw one of your videos, or I saw you in DC, or I saw your MAPS speech at Psychedelic Science. Please help. I'm like, God, and our only limitation is funding. I'll close on this, man. I'm putting this out to the universe. I don't want to be doing this. What would put a smile on my face is the No Fallen Heroes Foundation is gone, is not needed. But you and I laughing about a minute and a half of funding. I'm pretty sure we're going to be needed for the next 5 to 10 years before this is mainstreamed and the VA is true. I mean, I couldn't even get hearing aids from the VA. You're telling me that they're going to approve me to go do a psilocybin in Colorado anytime soon. So I know we're going to be needed for a while, but just, I want the universe to know I don't want to be doing this. I'd rather our government take care of our heroes. But until that day, No Fallen Heroes is going to keep on fighting.
Right on, Wiz. Well, thanks for doing what you do. And I hope we can do this again, and hope we can link up in the near future.
Yeah, man. Make sure you make it down here to Boca. I want to take you up in the fighter jet and bend you around a little bit and pull some G's.
Ooh, I would love that, man. Thanks so much.
All right, brother. Fight's on.